"Susan, what are you doing?" As we returned from shopping, we saw a moving truck in front of our house. My in-laws were there, looking surprised. My mother-in-law was directing the movers and said, "Please don't just barge into our house on your own accord. Don't get sassy with me, young lady. Hurry up and open the door." My father-in-law reached for my purse and I clutched it, stepping back. My mother-in-law laughed sinisterly and told the movers to leave. I was speechless, but Tom, who had heard everything, started trembling violently. "Do you not know who you're talking to, Mom?" he said. I knew it was time to tell the truth. "My name is Christy Grubb. I'm 48 years old, and I run an insurance agency that I took over from my father. I love having everything organized, and this job suits me perfectly. We've maintained good relationships with old acquaintances, and business has been booming. I met Tom when I was 30 at a work event. A client, a longtime friend of my father, introduced us. Tom was 2 years older, calm and refined. He had just broken up with a long-term girlfriend who had cheated on him. We hit it off quickly and started going out. My mother wasn't in good health, and I wanted to fulfill her wish to see me in a wedding dress, so I was actively seeking a marriage partner. I think I rushed things a bit. Tom wasn't as keen on getting married, but respected my feelings. 6 months after we met, he proposed, and I happily accepted. We had a small family wedding, and my mother looked so happy. She passed away the following month, but thanks to Tom, I could fulfill her last wish. Tom stayed by my side and held my hand, even at my mother's funeral. I decided to cherish him for the rest of my life. Even after 5 years of marriage, Tom and I hadn't had children. We believed children are a gift from heaven, so we didn't feel rushed, but my in-laws kept bringing it up. When we went to greet them for New Year's, Tom was reluctant, but we went because my mother-in-law asked us directly. "No child yet? When are you going to give me a grandchild?" she asked. "Mom, we've told you we're leaving it up to nature. If you're going to talk like that, we're leaving," Tom replied. "I understand, but maybe the field is barren," she said. "That's rude to Christy," Tom snapped. I apologized and suggested we leave. We hadn't even exchanged New Year's greetings. Tom felt bad and apologized to me in the car. "I'm really sorry for making you feel uncomfortable." "I'm fine. I'm sorry for making you feel bad," I replied. "It's fine for me. They are my parents after all. But now my family is you, Christy. If anyone, even my parents, hurts you, I'm ready to cut ties with them," he said. Since then, Tom made it a point to distance me from his parents. We even moved to a new place. They tried reaching out multiple times, but Tom ignored their calls. For the next 13 years, I had little to no contact with my in-laws except during family events like weddings or funerals. By our 40s, they stopped bringing up grandchildren, which was a relief. One day, out of the blue, they found our place and paid a surprise visit. Tom was out with a friend, and I was alone. My in-laws barged in, nosily rummaging through our stuff. "Goodness, you two still share the same bed at your age. How scandalous. Christy, with these kind of undergarments. Don't you think Tom won't be excited?" Susan sneered, ignoring my disgusted expression. They continued to swoop around, making snide comments. "This is probably why you guys don't have any grandkids for us," Susan said. Now, dear, there's still hope. Look," she exclaimed, shoving a crumpled newspaper article into my hands. It was about a woman who gave birth at 60. Realizing their implication, I felt a chill down my spine. "We've been too lenient on you. Even at your age, you could still have kids, right? You might as well move in with us," she suggested. "I'm home. Do we have guests?" Tom called out. Little did they know, Tom and I had been living with my father since we moved. Tom cared deeply for my dad, and my dad treated Tom like his own son. Seeing my dad, they looked shocked. "You're having Tom support your own father, too." Normally, one would first show gratitude to their husband's parents. I was at a loss for words, not knowing how to respond to Mike and Susan's entitled behavior. "We're always grateful for your kindness. I really didn't expect to see Christy's father here. Isn't it a blow to your pride, relying on my son?" My dad replied with a vague smile. They looked visibly irritated. "Mom, Dad, how did you even find this place?" Tom, who had returned early because his friend wasn't feeling well, stormed in with a furious expression. Susan replied nonchalantly, "You never told us, so we hired a detective. It was pretty pricey. You'll pay for it, right?" "No way in hell I'm going to pay for that," Tom shouted. He stumped over to Susan, grabbed her by the clothes, and dragged her out of the room against her will. "Hey, that hurts. What are you doing, Tom? You're hurting your mother. Stop it right now." Susan screamed while Mike's loud shouts echoed through the room. Tom didn't care and continued to drag Susan to the entrance, then pushed her out of the house. "Don't ever come back here. I'm even considering cutting ties with you guys." "Oh my, is this Christy's doing? What kind of wife have you married?" Susan protested. "It has nothing to do with Christy. I've made up my mind. Get lost." Once Tom threatened to call the police, they reluctantly left. Tom apologized to me and my father. "I'm really sorry. I can't believe they went as far as hiring a detective to find us. They've been incredibly rude." "No, Tom, it's not your fault. I know you're a good kid. Come on, let's eat together," my dad said. With tears in his eyes, Tom thanked my father repeatedly. That night, the three of us had a pleasant dinner together. We decided not to move and to call the police if they showed up again. Surprisingly, weeks passed without seeing them, and we thought we could continue our quiet life. A month later, my father passed away. Tom and I went on a trip to buy some memorabilia of my father. On the way back, I couldn't help but scream out, "What are you doing, Susan?" What we saw were movers and my in-laws in front of our house. Susan glanced at me in surprise and then continued giving instructions to the movers. "Don't just enter the house without permission. Please don't talk back to me, young lady. Just open the door." Mike reached out for my bag, and I hugged it tightly, stepping back. Susan, with a sinister smile, continued, "Outsiders should leave immediately." I was stunned by her words and couldn't respond. Tom, who had heard everything, was trembling with anger, his face turning red. "Do you not know who you're talking to, Mom? What are you talking about?" Feeling this was the right moment to tell them the truth, I decided to speak. "This is my house." Susan stared at me with a confused and accusatory look. "What are you talking about? You made Tom buy this house, right? How shameless can you be?" Tom sighed deeply and began to speak. "This is genuinely Christy's house. I'm just living here with her permission." "Tom, is Christy blackmailing you?" "Poor thing, you don't have to tell such obvious lies. Besides, Christy is a housewife, right?" Tom's eyebrows shot up. He was angry that she implied I was manipulating him and also that she called me a housewife. "What do you mean Christy is a housewife? Christy runs an insurance agency." "What are you talking about?" "She's always at home, going to spas and dining at fancy restaurants with some unknown man." The man Susan mentioned was my client. I had recently met an old client of my father's for lunch to discuss business. Tom knew about it and had agreed to it. If Susan had hired a detective, she should know I went home alone after lunch. She clearly wanted to break us up. That person is an acquaintance of mine and a client of Christy's. I couldn't go because of work, but we do dine together occasionally. "Tom, you're being deceived. It's not too late. You can marry a younger woman and have grandchildren." "I would hate to marry anyone other than Christy. Besides, I can't have kids with anyone else anyway." "What? What do you mean?" At Tom's shout, Susan, Mike, and I were all dumbfounded. Neither Tom nor I had undergone fertility tests because we didn't want to blame ourselves if there was an issue. But a few years ago, after I had a high fever, a doctor recommended I get tested. I did it secretly and found out I was born infertile. I hadn't told Tom because I feared he might leave me. Just because you can't have kids doesn't mean I would ever leave you, I said. Yeah, I know, but I couldn't help feeling insecure. I instinctively hugged Tom, and he hugged me back. I was filled with the resolve to cherish Tom forever. What do you mean you can't have kids? You were a defective product all along. Is this a joke? Have you been deceiving us all this time? My in-laws seemed to forget about me and started berating Tom. He looked at them coldly. I've told you time and time again that I'm not your toy. To call your own son a defective product is not something parents should do. What's wrong with calling a defective product a defective product? Susan was enraged. She grabbed Tom by the chest, approaching him threateningly. Then Tom whispered a man's name softly. Hearing it, Susan's face turned pale, and she backed away. Who is that? Mike asked, confused. That's the name of my biological father. What are you talking about? Your father is me. I didn't know until recently either. Remember when you hired a detective to follow me? Well, I hired one too and found out a lot of interesting things. Tom showed his phone screen to Mike. Susan's face went white and Mike's turned bright red as he began to tremble. Were you cheating on me? Is this guy Tom's father? Have you been cheating for 50 years? That's not it. What do you mean, that's not it? You dared deny it when you were hugging each other. Ignoring my in-laws' loud bickering, Tom and I asked the moving company to relocate our stuff to a nearby storage unit. There was an extra charge, but since my in-laws started this mess, it only seemed fair they shoulder the burden. So I've been raising another man's son. I'm horrified at spending money on a defective product who isn't even related to me by blood. Tom, you better take responsibility and support me. Got it. Huh, no way, Tom replied. What? You have an obligation to support me, my father-in-law lunged at Tom, but Tom easily pulled away, flashing a smile. The only one who needs to take responsibility is Mom. I was just born. Besides, you didn't even pay for my high school and college expenses. I've been living on my own since high school. You? How can you say that? While I was desperately earning tuition money, unable to hang out with friends, you were stealing my part-time job money. What more do you expect me to say to such a father? That's when I finally understood why Tom disliked his father so much. However, his father simply acted as if it was all justified. A child's money is the parent's money, and so is the child's spouse's money. But we're not related by blood. On paper only. If you really want to cut ties, then return all the money we spent on you. Already did. I've been sending money back every month. Huh, sending money? I knew Tom had been sending money to his parents' house, even more than they asked for, just to keep them from getting involved with us. However, his father seemed genuinely unaware of the money. See, I've been transferring $1,500 every month. Hey, what's going on? Ah, I get it. Mom has been using all my money for herself and her lover. What? Susan could only fidget as her husband approached her and slapped her across the face. Initially shocked, she soon glared at him and screeched, "How dare you? You should be grateful that a man with no money or status could marry me. He's a man with both money and status. Staying married to you is just convenient for enjoying life with him. I even let you raise his child, didn't I? Be thankful." Are you kidding me? You said you were pregnant, so I married you even though your father beat me up. So what? It would have been pitiful if he got beaten up. My father-in-law was speechless at Susan's sudden and drastic change in attitude. Just then, Susan's smartphone began ringing loudly. She checked it, her face lighting up as she answered in a sweet, coy voice. "Hello, darling. What's up? Missed me?" Shuddered at hearing Susan's voice for the first time. Tom, standing beside me, had a twisted expression, though he was smiling. I would soon understand the meaning behind that smile. Wait, you're not darling. Ma'am, what? Oh no, this is a mistake, or rather, all of it. Alimony, $10 million. Wait, please hold on a moment. Susan frantically spoke into the phone, but was forcefully cut off and left in a daze. Tom started chuckling. All the evidence, photos, and recordings must have reached them. What? This is your fault. It's called sharing information. Oh, and by the way, she has no intention of divorcing your boyfriend. He's a son-in-law in her family, after all. Tough times ahead for you. A son-in-law? You didn't even know that. Well, it seems like he's keeping a number of mistresses. He was told by his wife to only cheat with younger women, right? He must be getting an earful right about now. Mistresses. But he said he loved only me. Stunned by these shocking truths, Susan slumped to the ground. Mike looked down at her with satisfaction, then suddenly turned to Tom with a thought. It must have been tough having such a mother. All right, I'll let bygones be bygones this time. Let's live together, just the three of us. Cut ties with your mother, and it'll be you, me, and Christy. Christy, I'll wash your back for you. Stay away from Christy. Unfazed by Tom's words, Mike approached me. As soon as his hand landed on my shoulder, I grabbed it and threw him to the ground. Oof, what they? Surprised and confused, Mike didn't understand what had just happened. I looked down at him with a cold gaze. I had been attending self-defense classes since I was young. Though my job in insurance involved dealing with companies, there were still good and bad encounters depending on the client. I started learning self-defense so I could escape if I ever found myself in a dubious situation. This was one of the conditions my father set for me to take over the company. Gradually, I started enjoying the classes and kept attending them even after taking over the business. I wondered if I had gone too far with a 75-year-old man like Mike, but seeing Tom looking satisfied as he gazed down at his father, I felt a bit relieved. Mike seemed too shocked to speak, but then Susan, my mother-in-law, started talking. Christy, that was impressive. I'm sure you can handle anything. How about this? Why don't you pay the alimony to that woman for me? If we live together, we could save on living expenses, and I can help with the household chores. And about kids, we could always adopt. I'd take good care of them. Are you kidding me? There's no way I'm letting a woman like you into my precious house filled with memories of me, Tom, and my father. And why should I be the one to pay the alimony? You should pay it yourself. I found myself saying everything I had been thinking directly to Susan. She was taken aback at first, having never been spoken to like that before, but her face quickly turned red as she started yelling again. How dare you talk to your husband's mother like that? I've already told the neighbors we'd be moving in, and besides, that house is already being demolished. That's right, I don't have a house to live in anymore, so forget about her. Let me stay. What are you saying? I'm his mother. He should be living with me. Mike, responding to Susan's words, stood up from the ground and shouted back. While Susan argued fervently, Tom calmly and seriously communicated our intentions. Neither of you will be living with us. We've decided to cut ties completely. If you continue to make a scene here, we will call the police. At the mention of the police, my in-laws' faces went pale, and they backed away. Still arguing, they disappeared towards the train station. Later on, Mike and Susan got a divorce. However, since neither of them had any money, they ended up living together again. Mike tried to claim alimony from Susan and her lover, but it was offset by a claim from the lover's wife. Susan, having never worked long hours in her life, found it difficult to hold down a job. She would quit at the slightest inconvenience and was already struggling with daily expenses. Mike was in a similar situation, and they were just barely getting by with their combined incomes. The lover, on the other hand, was squeezed dry. He lost his rights as the next company president and is now confined to his house. His wife couldn't easily forgive a 50-year affair. and I heard she intends to take him for all he's worth. I thought Tom would be down after such an incident, but surprisingly, he got over it quickly and is doing well. Apparently, the lover's family approached him, suggesting that since he shares blood with the lover, he could become their heir. However, Tom, not a fan of competition and not particularly greedy, simply said, "That's too much for me to handle," and signed the paperwork to renounce the inheritance. While I feel a bit disappointed, it's so like Tom, and I'm happy about it. As for me, a business associate recently asked if I wanted to adopt a cat they had found, and I'm currently excitedly looking up cat towers. I've already decided on a name, Marine. It's a tribute to the frequent fishing trips my father and Tom used to go on, and the cat's eyes are as blue as the sea. Even Tom seems to be in high spirits, eagerly anticipating the arrival of our new family member. The doorbell rang, signaling the arrival of my business associate. Well, time to meet our new family member. Excitedly, I opened the door and greeted them. "Welcome."
"How could you do this to me?" I shouted, my voice echoing in our cavernous foyer. Dean stood impassively, almost bored, as I confronted him. Behind him, my 17-year-old stepson, Caleb, smirked. "Come on, Alana," Dean drawled. "Stop with the hysterics. We both know this marriage was a business arrangement. I needed access to your money, and you wanted the status of being a corporate wife." I recoiled as if struck. "A business arrangement? Is that all our decade together meant to you?" "Oh, please," he scoffed. "You really bought into the whole till death do us part fairy tale? I enjoyed the lifestyle you provided, but now your well has apparently run dry." His words knocked the wind from my sails. I had just endured the most embarrassing board meeting of my career after a failed project cost the company millions. My job was now on shaky ground. But looking into my husband's cold, greedy eyes, I realized the difficult day at work paled in comparison to the bomb Dean just dropped on our marriage. "Caleb, sweetie, talk some sense into your father," I pleaded to my stepson. He just glared and shook his head. "Sorry, Alana, but I'm with Dad on this one. We heard from our country club friends that you lost your big inheritance. So if you don't have money anymore, what use do we have for you?" The casual cruelty stunned me. It was then that the truth hit me like a splash of frigid water. My carefully curated life had all been a fragile house of cards. One breath of ill financial fortune was apparently enough to blow it all down. Rage and adrenaline stirred my shock into action. If cold hard cash was all that mattered to them, so be it. "Get out," I hissed through gritted teeth. Confusion flashed across Dean's face. "You can't kick me out of my own house." "The hell I can't," I cut him off. "This is my name on the mortgage, remember? You wanted access to my good credit for this palace, and since all you care about is money, consider our little business arrangement terminated." I marched over to the front door and held it open. "I'll expect you both to be gone by morning. My attorney will deliver the divorce papers next week." Dean's lip curled derisively. "You'll regret this, Alana." I stepped forward until we were nose to nose. "The only thing I regret is wasting years of my life on a shallow, greedy coward like you. Now get out before I have you removed." For a second, Dean stared at me incredulously. Then, with a final sneer, he brushed past me out the door, Caleb trailing obediently behind. As soon as the door slammed shut, the adrenaline fueling my bravado evaporated. With shaking hands, I slid down the wall until I collapsed in an undignified heap, ragged sobs tearing from my throat. Rock bottom. After years of tirelessly climbing the corporate ladder, here I was, job in jeopardy, marriage in tatters, alone in this echoing mausoleum I used to call home. Used to being the operative phrase, because tomorrow I would start over. Rebuild. As I laid there taking stock of my new circumstances, the tears slowly dried to a hard, glittering determination. Dean and Caleb wanted to play dirty? Game on. If all they valued was net worth and public image, then consider the gauntlet thrown down. I vowed then and there to attain the kind of success they could only dream of. And once I did, I would make them regret the day they betrayed the wrong woman. The best revenge would be rising from the ashes of their callous dismissal like a phoenix. Yes, there would be sweet vindication in proving I didn't need them or their conditional affection. My worth was not defined by men who saw me as nothing more than a bank account. I would build something spectacular without them, and one day in the not-so-distant future, I would relish getting to slam the door in their faces when they inevitably came crawling back. I awoke the next morning feeling hollow and numb, the events of the previous night flooding back in a miserable wave. Dean and Caleb were gone. My fairy tale life had crumbled with staggering swiftness. As I shuffled to the kitchen to brew some liquid fortification, I passed Dean's home office. The door was ajar, and I paused, seeing the velvet ring box atop a stack of financial papers on his desk. My fingers shook slightly as I opened it to reveal the substantial diamond solitaire he had given me on our 5th anniversary. A knock at the front door jolted me from my reverie. My attorney had arrived with the divorce papers as promised. As we sat signing the documents that dissolved a decade together, I recounted the details of Dean and Caleb's ugly betrayal. My attorney's shrewd eyes narrowed. "We'll make sure this divorce is quick and quiet," she assured me. "Dean's business can't afford the negative publicity right now with that discrimination lawsuit pending against him. We'll get you favorable terms, I guarantee it." I nodded numbly, barely listening. None of it seemed to matter much anymore beyond a means to swiftly sever all remaining ties. Over the next few weeks, getting back on my feet financially became my prime focus out of necessity. The legal proceedings were moving at a brisk clip, just as my attorney had promised. Soon the day arrived when I came home one evening to see my possessions strewn haphazardly about the front lawn. Dean had clearly wasted no time reclaiming the house that was now awarded to him in the settlement, despite my name and credit on the line for it. My jewelry, designer shoes, and other valuables were nowhere to be seen. Undoubtedly already hawked by Dean in his desperate bid for liquidity to prop up his struggling business. Once a greedy opportunist, always a greedy opportunist, I mused bitterly. As the moving truck packed up my clothes and lone pieces of intact furniture to take to my new small apartment, I stood across the street staring numbly at the only home I had known for over a decade now, occupied by strangers. "You brought this on yourself, Alana," said the voice in my head that sounded disturbingly like Dean. "This is what happens when you don't take care of those loyal to you." An icy rage stirred in my gut. "Oh, don't worry, Dean," I thought venomously. "You'll soon see exactly what happens when you betray someone like me. I vow to rise from these ashes and regain everything I lost 100-fold without you. Just you wait, you reptile. My day of redemption will come." Over the next year, I shed everything about my old life, the luxury clothes and cars, the country club memberships, the circle of wealthy friends and socialites. I funneled all time and energy into resuscitating my career, slowly regaining my standing. Meanwhile, Dean's downward spiral continued as his business crumbled under the weight of discrimination lawsuits and increasingly poor leadership. Last I heard, he sold his Mercedes to cover payroll and moved into a small rental apartment much like mine. As for Caleb, the golden child, without my financial largesse, he had to withdraw from his Ivy League college dreams only one semester in. Dean could no longer afford even community college tuition. The updates on my erstwhile family's misfortune arrived via mutual contacts still in our social orbit. I received the news of their troubles with cool indifference. The scales of justice seemed to finally be balancing. My climb upward would soon intersect their fall. And intercept them I shall. I resolved anew each morning. My starved inner phoenix will feast on the ashes of their hubris soon enough. The pre-dawn light filtered into my Spartan apartment bedroom as my alarm blared. Just another day in my new reality. Divorced, financially rebuilding, career on the ropes. But today was different. Today was the launch presentation for Project Helix, the brainchild I had tirelessly devoted myself to over the past 18 months since the implosion of my marriage. Its revolutionary genetic testing algorithms for cancer diagnostics represented my professional phoenix rising from the ashes. I had handpicked a brilliant team and leveraged every business connection and favor accumulated in my long career to secure funding and top lab partners. Everything was on the line today: my reputation, my finances, my future. As I gazed steadfastly at my reflection in the mirror getting ready, the familiar icy determination settled into my bones, fueling every movement. My resolve hardened into an impenetrable shield. Today signaled a new beginning on every level. The presentation was a resounding success, garnering impressive investor commitments and glowing media coverage. As I shook hands afterwards, secure in the revival of both my career and bank account, I caught sight of Dean across the room. Our eyes locked. He looked older, paunchier, dressed in an ill-fitting rental suit. An ugly scowl marred Caleb's once handsome face beside him. Dean raised his glass mockingly in my direction before turning away. I smiled to myself as I networked with enthusiastic potential partners, no longer bothering to glance back at the shadows of my past life. Today was sweet vindication, the fruits of my labors on proud display. My ascension was just beginning, and his fading relevance was now an afterthought, onward and upward. Over the ensuing months, Project Helix rapidly became the cornerstone of a biotech startup funded by blue-chip investors. As CEO, stock options and a 7-figure salary quickly put me back in the black. Meanwhile, Dean was forced by creditors into bankruptcy and had to sell what few remaining assets he still possessed, including my treasured 5-carat anniversary ring, as I discovered. The business discrimination lawsuits had utterly destroyed his professional reputation. No one wanted to hire, fund, or work with someone so toxic. His fall from grace was almost complete. Caleb scraped by doing odd jobs, his Ivy League dreams replaced by the reality of community college dropout. How the mighty had fallen. Their crumbling fortunes were of only passing interest to me at this point. My star was rising to stratospheric new heights as industry accolades and magazine covers continued rolling in. I stayed laser-focused on nurturing this hard-earned success. My technology was gaining global recognition as a game-changer in oncology testing. As billions in potential market capitalization hung ripe for the taking, acquisition offers from all the pharma giants flooded my inbox, but I remained unmoved. My ambitions were far grander than cashing out now, like so many flash-in-the-pan biotech startups. I would build an empire that left no doubt as to my formidable talent and grit, a lasting legacy that no spoiled opportunist could ever wrest from my grip. As Project Helix's national rollout neared completion, I sensed my hour of sweet redemption was nigh. The day of reckoning I had nurtured like a smoldering ember these past miserable years. Soon I would confront the faithless parasites that derailed my life with such callous indifference. Dean and Caleb would finally behold with their own eyes what steely determination can manifest when someone with my tenacity puts her mind to a worthy purpose. The time had come at last to reopen that ugly chapter and slam it shut for good on my terms. My ascension was irrefutable, my rivals vanquished. Now to deliver the final blow that would humble them completely before my might and resolve. Soon, my old acquaintances would see that I was not defeated as presumed. No, I had returned, consulted, feared, and admired. My time had come again in spades. The game wasn't over, but the rules were about to change. Dean and Caleb would learn that to their sorrow soon enough. The phoenix had risen triumphant from the ashes they left. Now it was their turn to burn. I straightened my emerald silk blazer as I strode confidently into the soaring lobby of Prisma Laboratories. Today's meetings represented the culmination of intense negotiations for them to acquire a majority stake in my booming startup. On paper, I was selling control, but in reality, I would still lead operations with significant autonomy guaranteed in my contract. And the 9-figure payout would make me one of the wealthiest self-made female biotech entrepreneurs in history. Over the next few hours, I fielded complex questions from their executive team and arbitrated key deal points with my signature sharp focus. This was the crowning moment. My resurgence was almost complete. As Prisma's CEO reached across the glossy boardroom table to shake my hand in front of the approving audience, solidifying our pact, a surge of elation flooded my system. I had manifested the seemingly impossible. Risen from the ashes by virtue of grit alone, my attorney Arma Snyder-eyed me keenly as the noise died down. "Well played, Alana. They never saw you coming," she remarked approvingly. "This has been quite the turnaround from when we first met to dissolve your marriage. You're at the top again." I nodded, a small smile playing about my lips as I gazed out the soaring windows to the city below. Yes, indeed. And I must admit, while the professional achievement is profoundly gratifying, I'm also anticipating finally confronting lingering ghosts from my past very soon. Snyder's arched an eyebrow. I assume you're referring to Dean Turner? I understand he's hit desperate times since your split. Word is he may even face criminal fraud charges soon regarding his business dealings. Well, karma can be a real witch sometimes, can't she? I replied breezily. As for my dear ex, let's just say I have an important announcement about my recent windfall event that I intend to make very public soon. Dean always did covet the spotlight. As we gathered our things, Snyder paused thoughtfully. You know, Alana, living well is truly the best revenge, as the saying goes. Dean and your stepson already face more struggles than they can manage by the looks of things. But the choice is yours. I held her gaze unflinchingly. I appreciate your counsel, but I've come much too far and endured too much pain to not savor this moment. The time has come for the final reckoning. Over the next few days, I arranged an elite catered event at my sleek new downtown penthouse, ostensibly to celebrate the acquisition deal. But my real purpose was setting the stage for the final act of my vengeance upon Dean and Caleb. I made a point to conspicuously invite various old common contacts I knew would relay news back to Dean in short order. As expected, word soon reached my ex about the extravagant party and my massive windfall payout. I learned from my well-connected event planner that Dean was in a state of incredulous anguish upon hearing of my spectacular phoenix-like rise from the ashes. Predictably, he and Caleb instantly attempted to contact me, pleading for reconciliation now that my coffers had swelled again. But I simply blocked their increasingly desperate calls and messages without a second glance. My focus remained fixed solely on the upcoming spectacle I had carefully orchestrated for their final humiliation. The evening was perfect. Flexing my newly restored elite social status among powerful biotech nobility was profoundly gratifying. The catering was sublime, the champagne exquisite, the guest list exclusive. My couture silk dress attracted envious stares. Around midnight, Dean appeared uninvited at the door, attempting to charm his way past security. But I simply requested his forcible removal from the premises without bothering to leave my conversation circle. Soon, this whole ugly chapter plaguing me these last few torturous years could finally be laid to rest. My redemption song was nearly complete, needing only one last triumphant note. The time had come for my fortunes to irrevocably eclipse those who wrongly assumed I was finished. Tomorrow night, Dean and Caleb would comprehend the magnitude of their folly at long last. I would relish revealing how I prevailed while they crumbled. Vengeance would at last be mine in full measure. I surveyed the ballroom with pride, the elegant space glowing under crystal chandeliers. Tonight represented the pinnacle, the culminating spectacle during which I would regain control of the narrative that Dean and Caleb tried to write when dismissing me as irrelevant. False narratives have consequences, and tonight, before all the eyes of the elite circle they once traveled in, my adversaries would pay the ultimate price for their vain hubris. From behind the velvet curtain, I glimpsed familiar faces in the growing crowd. Socialites and industry titans whose circles once provided my daily sustenance mingled over cocktails. Soon they would all witness my astonishing rise from the ashes after barely hiding their schadenfreude over my supposed downfall not so long ago. A hush fell over the glamorous crowd as the lights dimmed. Then spotlights illuminated the stage where I stood resplendent in a beaded evening gown specially commissioned for the occasion. I savored the sudden shock rippling through the room. Indeed, rumors of my demise had been greatly exaggerated. Esteemed friends, colleagues, and supporters, welcome to this momentous night. My voice echoed confidently through the silent ballroom. I am beyond delighted so many familiar faces are here to help me celebrate recent events, which I shall disclose momentarily. First, a bit of context. I proceeded to recount my spectacular professional turnaround, born out of grit and vision when all seemed lost. Murmurs of surprise rippled through those who assumed bankruptcy and ruin following my brutal divorce and near-career implosion. And so it is with immense pride that I can now announce that Project Helix, my labor of love these past few years, has officially been acquired by Prisma Laboratories for a sum that shall propel my new firm, Turner Biologics, into the stratosphere. An astonished gasp went up from the audience, followed by a thunderous standing ovation as Dean's ashen face stared up at me in disbelief from the third row, Caleb shrinking behind him. The room roared with applause while my enemies grappled with this shocking public spectacle, revealing the scale of their gross misjudgment. I raised a hand and continued after the cheers died down, my voice ringing with conviction throughout the silent grandeur of the ballroom. My friends, you all saw me endure grievous betrayal and the loss of everything I held dear not so long ago. And yet here I stand before you stronger than ever, beholden to no one. My fortunes risen higher than my adversaries could have conceived. I allowed the dramatic words to sink in as hundreds of rapt gazes flickered between me on stage and Dean squirming in discomfort below. Let my astonishing journey serve as proof that integrity and grit conquer all. Much was taken from me, but now I have recovered my wealth and status 100-fold, while my enemies sink ever lower. Murmurs rippled through the ballroom as all eyes turned on Dean and Caleb. I let the discomfort stretch unbearably as camera phones immortalized their humiliation. Finally, I concluded, "Remember, friends, no matter how dark the night, the righteous phoenix shall always rise again, more glorious than before. Our setbacks oft serve but to propel our destiny higher than imagined if we but persevere." The ballroom erupted in a standing ovation as I soaked in my hard-won public vindication. Justice had been served at long last before all. Now closure could finally liberate me to chart wondrous new horizons unencumbered by the phantoms of past treachery. My revival was now irrefutably complete. As guests swarmed forward with praise and adulation, a strong hand gripped my elbow. I turned to see Caleb's eyes brimming with fury inches from mine. "You vindictive witch! We offered reconciliation, but you repaid our regrets with this spectacle?" He spat contemptuously before security pulled him back. I calmly held his baleful gaze. "The time for reconciliation ended when you threw me away believing you had broken me. Consider this long overdue payment for your arrogance." His glare spoke daggers before security removed him, but instead of satisfaction, unexpectedly I felt only a growing hollowness expanding in my chest. Because gazing into that warped face oozing vitriol, I glimpsed a mirror image, and felt the arms of my gleaming victory turn cold and leaden. I awoke the morning after my spectacular vindication gala, feeling hungover in more ways than one. While the champagne may have faded, the confrontation with Caleb still echoed unpleasantly in my mind. His rage and contempt was a mirror I could no longer avoid. In seeking to prove myself above their petty manipulations, had I instead lowered myself to their emotional wasteland by stooping to excess vengeance? You reap what you sow, Alana. What crops are now ripening from the seeds of bitterness and spite you've sown these past few years? I pushed the uneasy thoughts aside as I prepared for a series of major media interviews about the gala revelations. Prisma's publicity team would be leveraging the sensational arc of my comeback story as a boost for their newly acquired biotech crown jewel. Over the next few weeks, dozens of glossy magazine profiles and cable news segments broadcast the comeback queen's astonishing journey from a broken divorcee to self-made female billionaire. I should have felt only jubilation at this hard-won validation. But as I politely fielded invasive personal questions about Dean's betrayal and my Cinderella redemption, feelings of unease continued swelling steadily. Celebrity anonymity and the consolation of wealth could not fully dull the growing spiritual crisis born that night. I witnessed my own reflection in Caleb's contorted face. One morning, as I absently surveyed the impressive view from my sleek new corner office, my executive assistant announced an unexpected visitor, my old friend and attorney, Carla Snyder. As we exchanged awkward pleasantries over my exotic imported tea, I sensed this was more than a congratulatory visit. Her smile faded over the elegant china rim as she set down her cup. "Alana, I've considered us friends for over 20 years now, so I hope you'll receive this in the supportive spirit intended. Don't waste another minute on petty wars or ego when life is so fleetingly short. You have miraculously reclaimed everything denied you. Don't squander it for a false illusion of justice or power over others." Her compassionate gaze held mine unwaveringly. "Despite your success, you seem more melancholy than ever. True victory doesn't come from externally validating your worth at the cost of inner peace. Your life is yours now to fill as you choose, without constantly battling ghosts or seeking the meaningless validation of false idols." I stared silently as her words slowly dissolved my feeble inner defenses. The tears I had suppressed these past harsh years suddenly burst forth with unexpected force. Great heaving sobs coursed through me as she enveloped me in her arms. There, let the bitterness flow away, she soothed gently as months of tension flooded out. Forgive them, forgive yourself. Be free. In that instant, the remaining scales fell away from my eyes at long last. I saw with blinding clarity that in clinging to old pain and trauma as fuel for worldly ambition, I had simply perpetuated the same bleak emotional wasteland I condemned in Dean and Caleb. The phoenix had resurrected yet still dwelled among the ashes, denying herself rebirth into light. No more. Today I would step fully into my new life unchained from the past. The sweet fruit of my success would be savored without vain clinging to transient validation or memories of adversity suffered. I vowed to let compassion fill my heart henceforth, for those who betrayed me, for myself, and for all souls still dwelling in shadow. My remaining years would be a testament to the resilience of the human spirit when we turn from darkness into light. I took a slow, deep breath as I surveyed the familiar surroundings of my sleek corner office one last time. Today was my final day as CEO after selling the remainder of my shares in Turner Biologics. It was time to embark upon the next chapter of my life on my own terms, unshackled from past scars or vain ambition. The acquisition had made me tremendously wealthy beyond my wildest dreams. More importantly, it gave me the freedom to walk away while still young enough to explore impactful new horizons focused on uplifting others. My assistant entered hesitantly, interrupting my reverie. Mrs. Turner, your ex-husband Dean is here insisting he be allowed to speak with you urgently. I sighed, shaking my head wistfully. Even now, at the bitter end, he persisted trying to charm or manipulate his way back into my good graces after recognizing the full extent of his folly. Perhaps after years inhabiting bleak emotional wilderness devoid of genuine human bonds, even someone as warped as Dean felt the occasional flicker of regret. Escort him in, please, I requested calmly. I had nothing left to prove or fear from the faded, humbled man who entered moments later. His expensive attire barely concealed a gaunt, weary frame much aged from heavy drink and despair. This closing conversation was long overdue for both our sakes. Dean cleared his throat awkwardly. Alana, I know neither words nor deeds can undo the harm I've caused. But for whatever it may be worth now, I wanted you to know I fully comprehend the magnitude of my reprehensible betrayal after you showed me only love and loyalty. His eyes glistened with rare emotion. When you needed my support most vulnerable, I utterly failed and reveled callously in your downfall. Please believe me when I say few regrets have ravaged me more painfully than this. You deserved far better. I studied Dean's anguished face quietly as he awaited judgment he knew could never fully absolve the past. Had roles been reversed, would I have found compassion sooner without clinging to bitterness and hubris as fueling false strength? Did we not both lose our way, chasing empty validation once affection died? Dean, I spoke gently at last. Nothing can alter what choices we made when anger and pride blinded us. But having walked long miles in those shoes myself, I understand how easily we forfeit our humanity, grasping at petty wins. I stepped forward and lifted his chin tenderly so our eyes met fully. True victory lies not in worldly wealth or defeated rivals. No, it springs from cultivating understanding and wisdom to halt the cycle of pain. From there flows the peace and freedom to lift up ourselves and others. This I have learned, thanks to the very bitterness and treachery that I once deemed unforgivable. Dean scrutinized my face wordlessly as long dammed tears streamed down his haggard cheeks. I clasped his hands warmly, wordlessly conveying the forgiveness long overdue between us both. Finally, I stepped back, gazing hopefully towards the door where Caleb lingered uncertainly. My obligations here have ended. A new chapter begins for us all. Choose wisely where you walk hereon, friends, not just for your own sakes, but for those who need your light. With an encouraging smile, I turned away, then without hesitation or backward glance. The limousine waiting below whisked me towards tropical azure waters, and the blank canvas awaiting my vision for a new future, centered not on vainglory but service. For this precious chance to paint life anew, I owed immeasurable debts to protagonists of adversity now fading into memory. The phoenix had risen irreversibly from sullen embers. Shedding that tattered past with forgiveness, my resurrected wings now bore me gladly aloft towards horizons bright with purpose. Today was the first dawn where victory's glowing warmth finally filled me true from within, and I reveled joyfully in skies no longer darkened by lingering ghosts.